You're listening to Strange by Nature, your guide to the strange, weird, unbelievable, and improbable wonders of the natural world.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. I am Kirk Mona, and I am joined today by Rachel Ginza and Victoria Thompson. We are all professional naturalists who together have scoured the world for weird and wonderful wonders just to please your mammalian brain's desire for novelty. Isn't that nice? Let's do this.
Well, hey everybody, welcome back to the show. It's good to see you. Good to be here.
Hey, Victoria.
Hey.
Good to have you here.
Yay!
Always a good week when I'm with you guys.
Absolutely.
Oh, we love it when you're here.
So I want to start off this week's episode by getting you guys to tell me what you know about pirates. What do pirates do?
Oh, Victoria.
What? How much time do you have?
Yeah.
I mean, I know you run a camp about pirates sometimes.
I've been a part. I play a pirate villain in a certain summer camp. Well, my first question is: are you talking about like Hollywood pirates or like real life pirates?
Because there's a difference.
There's different
Are
types.
you talking about Asian pirates, like in the Pacific region, or are you talking about
talking about the golden age of piracy in the Caribbean?
I'm just talking about general pirate activities. Like what makes a pirate a pirate?
They take over ships.
Yeah, they take over a ship that is not theirs.
And are they peaceful about it, or
they're violent?
I would say,
yeah.
Unless you're talking about the gentleman pirate, then no. They are
pretty fierce,
violent.
bloody, violent. Will take over.
Lots of yars.
Lots of
so basically
swords
taking
and
other
guns.
people's stuff and hurting them.
Well, the piracy is taking something that isn't
I
yours.
think the hurting them is incidental, but yeah.
Yeah.
Survivors probably aren't a great thing in that line of work.
Yeah.
They may do
not
other
really much to do with them.
things that aren't savory either. Once you do something as major as piracy of like stealing something that isn't, which is what stealing is, right? It's taking something that isn't yours.
Correct.
I feel like other rules tend to just fall by the wayside.
Yeah. That's true. And
I'm so curious
that's
where this
true
is
for
going.
other criminals, not just pirates, which
Oh,
is
yeah.
a whole side conversation we could get into. But anyway, I am here today to talk about a pirate of the avian world.
Ooh.
Gonna tread a little bit on Kirk's territory here.
I'm intrigued.
Tread away.
The Great Skua.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Nice.
I've never heard of this.
First of all, skuas are a group of seabirds. They're in genus Stercorarius, and they're found around oceans and coastlines all over the world. Some species are also called Jaegers, but it's the same kind of bird. And interesting factoid, the name skua comes from Faroese, which is from the Faroe Islands language. It's related to Icelandic. This is the only bird name to come into English from Faroese. So you can impress all your friends with that little linguistic fact. Anyway, the Great Skua.
Let me push up my nerd glasses.
Yes, as I'm always doing. The Great Skua is Stercorarius skua. That's its Latin name, and it's found in the North Atlantic. They're about the size and shape of a herring gull, so it's like 50 to 58 centimeters long.
Okay.
Their wingspan's about 125 to 140 centimeters, so like 50-inch wingspan approximately, 22 inches long or so. But they're kind of built more robustly than a herring gull. They have a very large, deep chest, and they have dark brown feathers.
They have to be. They're still in the ocean, so.
Yeah. So they have dark brown feathers that are streaked with like gold or gray, and they have a kind of darker cap on their heads, black bill and feet. So these birds are pretty metal. Most types of skuas practice what's known as kleptoparasitism, which is basically just stealing food from other animals. But the great skua is known for being especially aggressive. They will steal food from basically any other bird that is around, not just smaller ones. They will also attack northern gannets, which are considerably
Big.
larger than themselves. They're like
Yeah.
100 up to 100 centimeters long and have like a 70-inch wingspan. And they're the largest.
wow.
They're the largest seabird in pretty much most of the great skua's range. So they'll just go and steal their food. Another linguistic factoid: the genus Stercorarius of the skuas means of dung, because
Oh, okay.
people thought
Of dung, huh?
yeah, of dung. People thought that the food that these birds would drop when they were chased by skuas, or maybe sometimes they would disgorge it from their gullets. Anyway, they thought it was dung, but it was just fish.
So I thought they were like dung chasers.
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah.
Or dung eaters.
Dung eaters.
That's not a
Gross.
great. It's like, what genus are you in? Oh, the dung eaters.
Yeah,
Okay.
It's only good if you're dung beetles.
right?
I'm not sure it's good then either. This is really.
I mean, at least it's accurate with dung beetles, right?
Sure.
Mhm.
I'll give you that.
So not only will they attack other birds to steal their catch, they will also use their nasty, sharp, hooked beaks to attack and kill smaller birds, such as puffins, and eat them. And naturally, they'll also steal other birds' eggs and chicks to eat.
Huh.
But not just other birds.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, they breed in Scotland, Iceland, the Faroe Islands, and Norway. And in some of these areas, they will also attack large land mammals. So,
What?
yeah,
That's wild.
yeah.
Like they have like moose that way.
Well, I haven't heard about them attacking moose.
not moose, but
We'll get
moose.
to yeah.
That would
Moose would
scare
be
you
a bit
more.
large. Yeah.
Well, I know, but I was like, you said large land animals. I'm like, a moose?
That is a large land
That-
animal.
That I want to see.
To be clear,
I
I
would love
do
to
not
see
have
that. That'd
any
be wild.
information about them attacking moose. But, for example, on Fula, which is an island in the Shetland Islands, north of Great Britain, they've been known to attack lambs and even foals.
Whoa.
Yeah.
What?
Yep. Like, I assume they're pecking at their eyes or whatever, but
Oh.
Yeah.
That's horrible.
they will.
That's so
Yeah.
rude.
That's just rude. Going for the eyes is just impolite, you know.
Ugh.
They'll also
Unnecessary.
feast on any roadkill or other carrion around. So
Okay, that's not as surprising, but
yeah, and on Fula they are extremely prolific, partly because there's a huge amount of there's like a big fishing fleet there, and there's a huge amount of bycatch that gets dumped, and so they just have this huge food source. So this has apparently given them an artificially high population on Fula, and it's likely led to some of the behaviors that have now made them extremely unpopular with the locals, who, by the way, call them bonxies. Bonxies. Bonxies.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Bonxies. That's a good name.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great name.
Apparently,
Oh.
the situation on Fula was very different in the 19th century. There was a natural history of the Shetland Islands in 1813, and in this they were recorded as being kind of almost revered by the locals because they would, being the metal birds that they are, they would attack and drive away eagles who would sometimes feed on lambs. And fishermen would actually
What?
voluntarily give a share of their catch to skuas who traveled alongside their boats.
Wow.
However,
Huh.
nowadays, any humans who approach skua breeding areas will certainly find themselves aggressively dive bombed. And
Fair.
in fact, it seems that South polar skuas, which are closely related to great skuas, can even distinguish between individual humans the way that crows can.
Cool.
Yeah, it is
All
really
right.
cool.
That's
Yeah, in
fun.
2016.
So they're like that's Larry. He gave me a sandwich last week. We're cool.
Yeah.
That kind of thing.
Oh, that's Bob over there. He hit me with a shoe.
Yeah, more that. So the way they figured this
Gotcha.
out was in 2016, there were some South Korean researchers in Antarctica that were studying these South Polar skuas. And that involved taking measurements of eggs and chicks in the nest.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So some of the researchers who were the ones doing the hands-on measurement made themselves extremely unpopular with the birds. And the birds would subsequently focus on dive bombing those particular scientists.
Amazing.
And so,
Amazing.
so this group of scientists decided to do a little, like, they had noticed this behavior. They decided to do a little experiment to prove it.
Love it.
And they tested it out with like a known individual and a neutral individual. And they would send them walking in different directions and see which the birds would follow and dive bomb. And they would change their clothes to make sure that they weren't recognizing the clothes. No, they recognized their faces. And
oh no.
In fact, these South Polar skuas have even been observed stealing milk from nursing elephant seal mothers.
How do you do that?
They just like
very carefully.
I actually saw a video of this. They hover nearby while the pup is feeding, and the pups can be a little messy sometimes, and milk dribbles down, and they just like dart in and lap it up.
What?
So milk drinking birds.
That sounds better than the crop milk we talked about earlier on the show.
Yes, it does.
Gross.
Like they're trying to find whatever source of calories they can. And
absolutely.
Elephant seal milk is extremely full of calories.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah.
But woof.
Yep. That's all I have. I just wanted to share about the violent piratical ways of the skuas this week.
Amazing.
Yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Victoria.
My sources this week were many, but mainly there was a blog post from the blog Hall of Einar. The BBC had an article about Fula, some information about the skua from Wildlife Trusts, an article from WBUR about the milk stealing of the South Polar skuas, and some stuff from Wikipedia too. All right, we're going to take a little break, and when we come back, it's going to be Kirk.
Woo!
Hey, we're back, everyone. A few weeks back on the show, I talked about glowing wounds at the Battle of Shiloh. Oh, yeah. That one was wild.
That was bonkers.
Go back and listen if you missed that one.
Amazing.
Now, I don't work at a battlefield. I work at a nature center. But really, in a way, I actually do work at a battlefield, and that's what I want to talk to you about.
I'm intrigued.
Every summer, early summer, a pretty epic battle is waged at the nature center where I work, and it doesn't take place in the forest or the prairie or the lakes or the marsh or even the bog. It takes place in the parking lot. So
I have
the combatants. I bet you do. The combatants
I've
are
been
all
to this
fired
parking
up.
lot, Kirk.
I know. And there's a battle that goes on there every single year. And the combatants are all fired up, very aggressive. I will point out they're all female, and there's about, give or take, 20,000 of them. I'm talking this week about pavement ants.
Pavement ants?
What?
Pavement ants, yeah. Have you heard of pavement ants?
I've probably seen them, I'm guessing.
Oh, you absolutely have.
I've definitely seen them. Please go on, Kirk. I have so many questions.
I know. As the name suggests, a paved parking lot is indeed a good place to find pavement ants. And I'll tell you, if you have ever walked down a sidewalk and seen little piles of sand along the cracks where ants are, you've seen pavement ants. Those are pavement ants.
Got it.
They live in the pavement.
All
and
the time.
probably,
I didn't know it was one particular species. I thought it was just like whatever ants happen to be around.
Pretty much every, there could be other species as well, but most likely what you were saying was pavement ants. I'm guessing, maybe not all of our listeners have seen this, but probably most of them have, because these ants are everywhere. They originated in Europe. and were originally brought to North America in the 1800s. The earliest confirmed records of the species in North America are from specimens collected in 1927 in Maryland, New Jersey, New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. But the only reason it was so late is that's when like science got around to cataloging them here. There's unconfirmed records as early as like 1748, which is, to be clear, before the United States existed as a country. So pavement ants have been here for pretty long time.
Long time.
Before
yeah.
there was
have
even
spread-
pavement.
Yeah, exactly. They have spread far and wide around the world, and they really do seem to prefer like urban environments where humans are. There's probably lots of food around, but also they just are adapted well to that sort of hard scrabble, pavementy sort of thing that humans tend to put up around them, so we can have vehicles and. Maybe they were even like, hanging out under chariot wheels back in the day. Who knows?
Hard
I did look all
dirt.
Yeah, I did look up all like sort of the major places that our listeners are. And I found that there are pavement ants in all those places. So our top listeners come from the United States, Canada, the UK, Australia, and New Zealand. And pavement ants are absolutely found in all those places and many, many more. They've spread so far and wide that they're sometimes known by the name immigrant pavement ants, especially in the U.S. is like that's actually their official name. Taxonomy for this group is kind of messed up and people argue about it, but the genus is Tetramorium, and the ones found in the United States are now considered Tetramorium immigrans. So basically the immigrant pavement ant. And there is other kinds of pavement ants in a couple other places around the world, but they're all very closely related. And from what I could gather, behaviorally are fairly similar. So basically, I think if you're living in a city on Earth somewhere, there's likely a species of Tetramorium living very near you right now, even if the exact species may be a tiny bit different. Since we're talking about names, I will mention that these are the same ants that commonly show up in your house. And when they do, people often call them sugar ants. So if you've heard of sugar ants, that's a little tricky because it's a common name, and that name gets applied to just like a lot of different species. But often when people say, "Oh, I got these little sugar ants in my kitchen," the little tiny ones that show up, those are probably pavement ants, which kind of makes sense. They might
I don't
be living
get those anymore.
in the foundation of your house
ants.
or something like that. Yeah, like carpenter ants. Carpenter ants can also show up in your house.
That's a sign of trouble.
That is not a good thing, Rachel, if you have carpenter ants in your house.
They only show up sometimes.
I feel like we tend to call them pavement ants when they're outside and sugar ants when they're inside, but same thing. For our Australian listeners, though, they may be familiar with an ant called the banded sugar ant, and that's a totally separate species, not related at all. So now that I got that out of the way, let's get to the heart of the matter here. These ants are territorial. So let's talk a bit about their territory. First up, we have the size of the nest. It's entirely underground, but the nests, I think, are pretty good size. Like, this isn't going to be crazy sized, but I think we see these little ant hills on the sidewalk. To be clear, those are just piles of mining waste. It's like, stuff that's being cast out from underground. Yeah. I remember when I was a little kid, I thought that like ants lived in ant hills. And so like kids would be like kicking the ant hills and be like, "Oh my gosh, you're being so mean. You're destroying the ant's house." And it's like, it's literally just their garbage pile. Like, you're kicking it away. It's not their house.
Just dispersing it a little bit more, yeah.
Yeah, like the actual nest itself can be as large as 52 square feet or about 5 square meters. If that's hard to picture, I haven't had trouble picturing like square feet or square meters, how big that is. Just for reference, the average size of like a parking spot in a parking lot varies a lot, but average is about 180 square feet. So less than 1/3 of a parking space is how big the actual colony is underground. So not terribly huge, but they can dig down as far as about 3 feet. They have lots of different chambers and whatnot. And the workers are what make up the bulk of the colony, and they can have about 10,000 workers in a really big colony. Maybe a bit more, maybe a bit less. So that's the size of the nest, but that's not the same as the size of their territory. And I did find varying information on this, but I did see one particular study that claimed a foraging territory as large as 63 square meters. So again, keeping with our parking lot measurements, that's almost 4 parking spaces. So, That's for teeny tiny ants. These are the really teeny tiny ones. That's a pretty big area.
Yeah. Especially if like their nest is like a third of the
Yeah.
if the nest is like a third of a parking spot and they're taking up a territory the size of 4 parking
that's
spots.
pretty big.
Pretty big. I mean, and these little ants, I think one of the limiting factors is they give off pheromones as they're walking around and making little trails to follow. Those evaporate and go away very quickly. And so if you go too far from your nest, you may never find your way back because your trail disappears pretty rapidly. Yeah. Like I saw someone talking about it was
breadcrumbs.
Yeah, it was measured in minutes. So you don't have a lot of time to find your way back. So, yeah.
Oh, wow.
Trouble can arise in several ways here. Ants may run into each other, like someone from another colony when they're out foraging, or just randomly run into somebody at the edge of their territory. Also, if there's like, some kid drops a little, popsicle or something, or some candy, or even a piece of meat or something in the middle of a parking lot, all of a sudden that's a big food source. Ants from multiple colonies may show up and have a little rumble over this great food source. And you can even have when ants will raid another colony and show up and be like, no, you guys have got a really prime spot for having a nest. We need the temperature to be just right. You got the best spot. We're going to, move in on your territory. So these huge battles ensue, and that's what I've seen. Nearly every summer, right at the beginning of the summer, we have this big ant battle that happens in our parking lot. Like I said, there can be 10,000 worker ants per colony. So a battle could consist of 20,000 ants all fighting each other.
Wow.
These battlefields may be drawn out like in a long grassy edge of a sidewalk or just in like a huge sort of circle. I would say the battle area is usually less than like a square meter. So kind of picture like fitting within a hula hoop. But within that battlefield, it's just wild. It is just a solid shimmering sea of fighting ants. I saw someone describe it as a living oil spill. And that's a pretty good description. It's just moving and undulating, and these ants are absolutely going after each other. Now, I wanted to get into the specifics of what actually happens in these battles, and I didn't actually know. I've observed them, but I haven't really sit down to watch all day because I've work to do. Usually at that time of the year, like summer campers are coming very soon.
To do that don't involve watching
as much as I would like to. But I decided to kind of do a little literature review and try to figure out what was going on. And I found out there is a ton of bad information online about these ants and what's really going on. I found one site claiming that a colony will completely viciously kill an entire other colony. And then the reason, like when the battle is done, you don't see any signs of that is that they are cannibals and they eat the dead. So the winning army, because it's good food, that's good protein, like they gobble up the losing army and then take over their nest, kill anyone who's left inside the nest, take the eggs from the losing colony back to their nest, and then raise those young as their personal slaves.
What?
Which
is this true?
That seems
to
like
be
a lot
clear,
of work, Kirk.
absolutely false.
Okay.
So I was like, what? This is actually a source that is cited on Wikipedia. And you'll hear us mention Wikipedia once in a while on the show as something we checked out when we're trying to get like a little like a number or something like that about, say, the size of a colony. There's really great information on there, but you got to check what the sources are that was used. The source that was used on this particular page, and there's a lot of the pages on different ant species, as you can imagine on Wikipedia, maybe aren't that well, researched and thought out. It's not a huge topic, but the source was like a pamphlet from an exterminator company.
Oh.
So I think they're like, look how vicious these ants are. They're cannibals and they are vicious fighters and they take slaves. You should kill the vicious cannibal slave owners, right? Like that's, I think, kind of where they're coming from. It's just, it's not accurate. It's not accurate. So like what is really going on? When you look at actual studies by actual scientists, the picture changes. It isn't as gruesome, but it points to a really fascinating adaptation. So when colonies meet, they absolutely do go to battle. They will lock together into pairs or dyads. but they generally aren't biting and trying to kill each other. It's basically a giant wrestling match. They're trying to physically subdue and pin each other to the ground. And to be clear, some ants absolutely do die in this process, but maybe it's like 10 to 100 ants out of a possible 20,000. So that's really small. It's almost more like incidental that some ants are dying in this process. And as the battle goes on, apparently like waves of reinforcements arrive. So like a big, new wave will come from the nest, and then more will come from the other side. And so there's these big pitched battles that go on and on. And basically it continues until one side has basically displayed their superiority, probably in terms of just sheer numbers. And they may actually then take over territory or a good nesting site. But here's the key part. From what I could gather, they don't kill off the other colony. And that's the interesting part. They may kind of kick them out and they have to find somewhere else to go, but they're not going to kill them. And it is very much in their interest not to kill their neighbor. And here's a really fascinating reason why. These ants absolutely will fight and kill off other species of ants that invade their territory. And if your neighbor aggressively defends their territory from other species, then that actually protects your borders from intruders, as your neighbor is essentially guarding your border because they have to come through your neighbor's territory to get to you.
Mm-hmm.
So by not killing each other, pavement ants are effectively the dominant ant in their habitat, which is mostly urban developed areas. There's very few other species that have been successful in getting a foothold. Even other related like pavement ant species have not been able to really get a good foothold in a lot of these cities because the pavement ants kind of weirdly protect each other by making sure that they may force each other around, but they're not going to kill each other off. So all the available habitat is taken up by the same species, and they all are kind of working together to defend against outsiders, which I find fascinating.
Huh.
And so cool. Yeah, it's not what I expected.
So that means no. That's like whoever is in like the middle of all of the pavement ants, like the center colony or whatever, the one who's like most protected around all sides, like they must have like the best pile driver or something, right? Like that's how that works.
Right? I was picturing an actual pile driver. I'm like, I don't know. Construction comes into it. I'm like, oh no, yeah, they're up there on the ropes. They're doing all kinds of clotheslines, and they're dropping from the top of the cage. They're going to town on all the wrestlers. They got the ladder match. They're doing the whole thing. It's really impressive.
I hope Brett is really proud of us.
Yep. So yeah, that's it. Wrestling, fighting, ants that actually don't kill each other because it's in their best interest not to, which is super cool. My sources for this, there was a 2019 journal article by Zhang et al. In Ecological Evolution. Also a great 2022 article in Myrmecological News by Moss, Swallow, and Green called Always Underfoot. And so it's really cool. This is a species that weirdly, I think actually has been studied a bunch by scientists because it's so ubiquitous and sort of easy to find. But a lot of that good research has not really gotten out into more of like pop culture type sources. You really need to get on like Google Scholar to be looking at scientific journals and things to really find information about them. But they are fascinating little ants.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah, no
Thanks,
problem.
Kirk.
We'll take a little break and we'll come back and find out what Rachel has for us.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Around the time that we are recording this, it's the time of year when the mosquitoes are out in force. If you have mosquitoes where you live.
I mean, in the northern hemisphere.
I know.
Yeah. Or in the tropics
bad
where they're out
this
all the
year.
time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ugh. The sun is pretty fierce, but once it sets, the sounds of night come out. The little chirps and trills are calling around. Along with that, there happens to be a really exciting little bug that I know I used to catch when I was a kid. I bet both of you caught when you were a kid. Fireflies.
Yeah.
Also known as lightning bugs.
I was watching in my yard last night, in fact.
Oh, that's great.
Oh, I've been seeing them flashing around in my yard and everything like that the last couple of weeks. But I actually saw one during the day last Friday. I was hanging out with a camper and we found one just on the pavement. And it was a wild time. We're like, what? It's a firefly. Anyway.
Cool. Was it blinking?
It was not because it was 4 p.m.
Right.
But we're going to talk about that actually, Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
So this is another one of those topics that I think as naturalists, we look at them, we look at lightning bugs and we're like, they're not that weird. They're not that strange,
they're
right?
pretty strange.
They're bugs. Well, I know that, but I feel like it's just one that we've passed by because it's like,
it's familiar.
Stranger things out there.
So it doesn't seem
too
strange.
familiar for us. Right. They're so bizarre, y'all. First of all, firefly is a common name, or also known as lightning bugs, depending on where you are. And actually, there's some scientific papers that go into the reason why you call them either fireflies or lightning bugs, depending on where you grew up. So I'm going to use both interchangeably. It's a common name. It actually covers a wide variety of insects, primarily within a group of 3. So there are beetles, glowworms, and something called dark fireflies, which are more active during the day. And those are all a part of this family of fireflies. And this is a scientific family. It's not just like, they're all buddies and cousins. Scientific family. As of recent-ish surveys, there are whopping 2,200 species described in the firefly family, which is more than I expected. And I think there's actually more than this. They're still finding new species because they're pretty affected by climate change and yards and lawns and things. So we're still looking and finding new species. In North America, there's about 165 species.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's way more than I thought.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. It is wild. So most of us, when we think of lightning bugs, we just think of like that flashing kind, right? In the dark.
Yeah.
Evening dusk time has come about, and we see little flashes of like a yellowish light at various spots in our yard. That particular kind is the flashing kind. So there's a couple different kinds. There is the glowworms, which I kind of talked about, in which case they glow pretty consistently. And then there's another kind that don't flash at all, actually. They don't exude any sort of light, and they use pheromones to attract mates.
Huh.
And then there are the flashing kind, which are actually, at least in the United States, much more common east of the Mississippi. Once you get west of the Mississippi, it actually becomes more common to see glowworms rather than the flashing kind of insects, of fireflies, which is wild.
Huh.
So fireflies are beetles, primarily, and they're able to communicate through their bioluminescence. They are typical insects. They look like regular beetles, like little black beetles with their thorax kind of has some color around it. They have compound eyes and generally like hard backed wings. They're about an inch or so in length when you actually get to see them, or about 2.5 centimeters or so in length, as like the largest ones that are around. But that's not what we're really here to talk about. We're like, okay, they're fireflies. They're kind of cool, like seeing them, but that's not the only thing that's fascinating. So fireflies, they go through the general metamorphosis cycle. They start off as a larva and they're in the ground. And when they're in the ground, they are bioluminescent.
Right.
They spend their time while they're larvae actually luminescing to attract and to try to attract like some prey, but for the most part to get to show that they're distasteful so other insects and bugs won't eat them.
Oh, interesting.
But But what is pretty wild is the larva are actually pretty specialized predators. So they feed on snails and slugs, but they actually have really good mandibles,
Really?
what will happen is they'll bite in to a snail or a slug, and they can exude a specific toxin to help digest, deliver like their digestive fluids into their prey to like turn them into goop so they can eat them. This is their larva form.
Delicious goop.
Lovely.
They love a good goo.
Ugh.
Who doesn't?
Yeah, it's pretty gross actually. But when they turn into an adult, once they go through and turn into an adult, a lot of them actually will feed on plant pollen or nectar. Some are still predatory. And then there are some species that actually don't have any mouth. Their only job is to mate, lay eggs. But I do want to talk a bit about their bioluminescence. What they'll do is to bioluminesce is they have a particular light emitting organ in their lower abdomen. So like on their belly, on their butt, right? Underneath them, they actually will use chemicals and luciferin in the presence of magnesium, ATP, and oxygen, and then they'll mix all of that together to produce light.
Cool.
Yeah.
So that's how they make the light, but how they use it is different. So depending on the species, they might have yellow, they might have green, or a pale red light.
Oh, cool.
Oh.
But it won't show up on infrared or ultraviolet.
Oh, so it's very narrow band of light.
It is a very narrow. And not only is it very narrow, but in fact, when the fireflies are flashing the way that they are, they're trying to signal to a specific, to a female of their own species.
Sure.
With the hope that the female, who doesn't have wings, actually looks a lot like a larva, down in the grass, sees them, thinks that they're flashing really, really nice, and flashes back at them. So firefly mating is a male going at a certain height, flashing certain frequency, certain amount of time. It's really, really specific to the species. Like if they are too high up in the air, they could be signaling to a different species of firefly. Whoa. And actually won't be able to like mate. And some females actually will flash to other species of male firefly to attract them so they can eat them.
Oh, very, very.
They're all flashers.
Cunning. Yeah, there's lots of flashers in my garden. That's interesting because so all the ones in the air are males. Like last night we were out in the garden at night, and there were a bunch of fireflies flying around, but those must have all been the males. I don't actually recall seeing any on the ground flashing back, so that's kind of curious. Yeah.
They are trying to find the females wherever they can. So that's why they're flashing, is they're trying to find the females. Sure. I don't generally see them pretty low either. It is generally the same, like they will have to flash the same sequence. So same duration of light in order to identify, yes, it's you. You are the same species. Cool. We can mate. Yeah, it's wild. And since it's so specific, it really truly depends, because it's how far above the ground, how many blinks you're doing, the color, if you're producing any pheromones as well, how long you're holding a blink. All of that factors into attracting a female and has to be just right. Otherwise, she won't flash back at you. And you have to do it a couple times before they flash back. And that doesn't even go into the ton of fireflies that don't produce any light, who just hang out in shadowy places and just are
undeserving
literally
of the name
called shadowy
Firefly.
places.
Right.
Truly undeserving. They're just hanging out. They're in the same family, but they're not flashing or doing anything like that. They have similar like lifespan and life cycle and everything, but they just don't produce any light. And they just hang out in the day, which I guess makes
not
sense.
at any
but
stage of their life cycle, like not even the larvae.
I think maybe the larva, but many just don't.
Yeah.
It's wild.
Okay.
Interesting.
But yeah, I just want to talk about these little weird bugs that flash their butts to attract a mate. It's just a wild time.
Flashing your butt to attract a
I had
mate.
a
You just named the episode there, Rachel. Good job.
Anytime, Kirk. So my sources this week were the Xerces Society, the National Wildlife Federation, Massachusetts Audubon, and Wikipedia. And I think that's it. That was just me.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Yeah.
That's it. We made it. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see everybody next week.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks everyone for listening to today's show. Be sure to subscribe. New episodes drop every Wednesday, and we love sharing this strange world with all of our listeners. If you would be so kind as to leave us a 5-star review, that would be great. It lets other lovers of the strange discover the show. You can reach out to us on social media by searching for Strange by Nature Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. You can send us an email as well. Our address is contact@strangebynaturepodcast.com. If you want more information about the show, you can also check out our website, which is strangebynaturepodcast.com. Until next week, get outside, stay curious, and embrace the strange.